Perfect. So I'm Dana. I own Boss Consulting HR. We are a small boutique human resources consulting company up in Norwich, which I know some of the names and the faces, but I primarily focus in the small business market in terms of serving small businesses that don't need a full-time HR person on staff, just to make sure that they're compliant and they know what's expected of them in terms of all the new wacky laws and regulations and best practice that comes from having employees. So this is just a little bit about me. And of course, I have to include a disclaimer. We don't really talk much about, legal compliance in this subject matter, but just know that it's for educational purposes only. And if you run into any sticky situations, you always want to make sure that you consult with a really amazing labor and employment attorney. So this is what we're going to kind of talk about today. We're focusing on how to recruit and interview and onboard in a virtual world. There is a silver lining to it, so we'll talk a little bit about that. It's not all, it's not doom and gloom. There's definitely a silver lining to it. And we'll talk a lot about culture and how it's really important, more so than ever now that we're in a virtual space, to incorporate and highlight parts of your business that really make it special. We'll talk a little bit about interviewing and automating your recruiting process and how you can save some time by kind of implementing a couple different things. We'll talk about how to host a virtual career fair and some best practices. And then I think it's important to also touch on some hiring bias. There's definitely some new things just to consider when we're in this virtual space, and then onboarding, and then a couple tools of the trade. Since it's such a tiny group, please speak up if you have a question, or you can send it in the chat. I think it's helpful to make this as interactive as possible. And there will be time for questions at the end too, so if you want to wait until the end, by all means. So this little takeaway came from a study that Brazen did. Brazen is one of the tools that I was going to recommend. They do, and they offer really fantastic solutions for virtual onboarding and virtual interviewing. But they created this great infographic just about the positive parts of virtual recruiting by necessity. And I think, that's why I call it the silver lining. I think the pandemic, it's been hard for recruiters and for businesses who are hiring. I'm sure you all have felt it, that, you have existing unqualified staff, right? But then when there's $600 extra unemployment, it becomes that much harder to get people to work for you, especially when they can make more on unemployment than they can working. And then you also have, the fear factor of hiring right now, where people are very worried about exposure and still worried about, what happens if I start a new job? What's the PPE protections? Am I putting myself at risk if I go back to work? So, there have absolutely been some challenges, but along with employers recognizing how much of their work can be done remotely, the pandemic has really encouraged businesses to kind of pivot and readdress and assess their recruiting processes. And it's really forced a lot of employers to level up their systems and streamline their processes. And we're going to talk about some of those ways that they've done that, which in turn has expanded a candidate pool. You now don't have to recruit just locally to your 50-mile radius from your business location. You can recruit anywhere. So that brings you a more diverse candidate pool, which can really be fantastic. Can reduce paperwork, which we all know in HR can be super burdensome, and then also can help, when done correctly, reduce time to hire and the time actually spent on recruiting. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of going virtual or going digital. Um, as said before, it opens up a whole new world of recruiting. So you have far reaching opportunities. You can source from places that you necessarily weren't able to source from before, which in turn expands your talent pool. Uh, with a better talent pool, it can reduce the time that it takes you to hire. And it can also reduce the spending that it takes to have jobs posted. But when you hire virtually, you do lose out on one of the really critical components of interviewing, which is that face to face and meeting the candidate in person and showing them your workplace and infusing, your culture into that interviewing process. Um, and I think the research is not new in terms of what candidates look for in an employer, but I think the need to really focus on them is way more important. So the challenge is culture. And this also comes from this little infographic, also comes from Brazen, but outside of salary, what do candidates want? What do people look for in job opportunities? They look for a good company culture. They look for something that resonates with them, that they feel connected to. They look for rich company benefits. So, good paid time off policies, good medical benefits, and affordable medical benefits. They also, of course, look at the job. They want to know that the job that they're doing and the projects that they get to do and um, the growth opportunities exist and are there. They're also looking for flexibility in terms of scheduling and the ability to work remotely. I have found that people actually can be more productive working remotely versus coming into the office. So, is the ability to work remotely something that's going to be a long-term part of the position? And then the recruiter's time to respond. So all of these components that are deciding factors for candidates, you have the opportunity to impact them virtually. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to infuse a little bit of culture into your business. But I think what's most important is you start from understanding what is your outward projection of your business. So, Allie, do you work in human resources?
Sorry, muted myself.
That's okay.
Not directly. I have some offshoots of it that I work with my counterpart who is, or not even, I'm sorry, my boss, and I get a very low level integration in that.
And then Deb, are you in HR? No? Okay. So I don't know if this is on your kind of your scope, I guess, in terms of what you do in your day-to-day, but it's really important for businesses now to understand what is their outward presentation. 75% of job seekers research a company's brand and reputation before applying. So that's really important to know what is your reputation outside of your workplace in terms of job seekers. These are two reviews that I pulled from Glassdoor, and it is actually a former employer that I worked with. And I think if you look at how Glassdoor operates, these are obviously former employees that put these reviews out there, but they can be shared on Facebook, they can be tweeted, they can be linked, they can be emailed, and people have found them helpful. So you really want to do a good Google of your business and see, what are people saying about working for us? What are people saying about our benefits, our interviewing process, the company culture? Because if you don't have a good handle on what the outward perception is of your business, it's going to make it really hard for you to attract and hire really good candidates, whether it's virtually or in person. So what we have seen in terms of kind of the outward view of an employer is that having social media can really show the reality of workplaces. So if any of you troll TikTok the way that I to the level that I troll TikTok, you'll see
Uh,
there's people are not afraid to post, what's behind the emerald curtain related to their employers. I was watching this other one the other day where it was a Dunkin' Donuts employee, and he was showing how much donuts or how many donuts they throw out at the end of the day. And so that's the tricky part. It's not just a company saying, this is what we do, this is what's important to us, this is what our core values are. And then, you know, trying to do everything they possibly can do to make it seem that way on the inside as well. You have employees who are blowing up their employer's spots and really showing what it's like to work on the other side of, that hiring door. And it's the good and the bad. We see it, I've seen great stories of people who talk about their workplaces and how fantastic they are to work for. I just saw one the other day about TJ Maxx, where it was actually someone posting on behalf of their mother. Their mother had just started working at TJ Maxx and had an emergency medical health situation come up. And TJ Maxx not only afforded her the leave that she needed to take care of, whatever she needed to take care of, but they also sent her flowers, and she had a job to come back to when she was recovered. So it's a, social media is really important for branding and putting your company out there in terms of a viable employer, but you need to make sure that you're open and honest about what you're putting out there. So when you are recruiting and you are having conversations with candidates, honesty and openness are key. So you have to be prepared to have authentic conversations with candidates and answer any question that they may ask about the job and the employee experience, because they're not coming to your work site anymore for interviews. So they're not interacting with your employees. They're not seeing the office spaces or the lunchroom, or whether or not the employees seem like they're having a good time. So you have to really do a good job painting that picture for them. And candidates also want to know what your COVID response has been and will be. And they also will want to know, how has COVID impacted your business? So one of my clients is a food and beverage company based out of Mystic. And I have gotten that question from almost every single candidate that I have phone interviewed is, how has the company adapted with COVID? So, you want to be prepared to have an honest conversation about what can employees expect and how can employees feel safe being employed with you. In addition, and I think this is a big shift with the candidate pool, I have found, I'm a millennial, so we millennials are known for job hopping and always looking for the next best opportunity. And I think one of the big shifts that I'm seeing as I'm recruiting is that people want to know about the security of a position now. They don't necessarily see the opportunity to just find another position if it doesn't work out. So they want to know, with so many people getting laid off back in March and April, they want to know that the opportunity that they're being considered for is permanent, long-term, or that the company is stable and isn't going to lay them off 2 months down the line. So with virtual recruitment, it offers you kind of an endless talent pool. Again, you can recruit from all different areas of the United States, all different geographical locations, and it can be really easy to waste time hoping that you find the right person in that pool. So it's crucial before you start actually recruiting that you know what you're looking for. So define exactly what you're looking for in terms of the skill set, the education. How will they enhance your team and your company culture? And I think who people talk to during the recruiting process is far more important now that everything's happening virtually. So I'm a big fan of phone interviews. I think that they are an essential part of recruiting, and they should be for every business, whether you're, 20 employees or 2,000 employees. You should be vetting candidates before they come and spend 45 minutes to an hour interviewing. My phone interviews are generally 15 to 20 minutes, and I get a good sense of how a candidate speaks about their employer, current employer, former employer, how they speak about the opportunity. And so we're evaluating candidates, when we have those conversations with them, when we have those phone interviews. But there are other ways when we're talking to candidates that we can infuse some culture into those conversations. So who a candidate speaks with and how a candidate is spoken to during that process can really infuse some culture into those conversations. How quickly they hear from someone. We were constantly getting ghosted by candidates. And I don't blame them, because employers were doing a really good job ghosting candidates and never telling them if they received a job offer or if they were still in consideration. And so responding quickly to viable candidates and following up and honoring your word helps share with those candidates what's important for you as a company. And it's also a good time. You can get really fun with your questions. And I think that's a really good way to infuse some culture into your pre-screening process. So, let's say every Friday you guys have, or every Monday you do a mug Monday where the whole team gets on a Zoom call with, their company mugs, and you have a 15 to 20 minute kind of breakdown of the week. Maybe one of the questions that you ask a candidate is, what's your favorite type of coffee? Or how do you take your coffee? And here's why. I was telling my intern was working on some interview questions, and I said, you can ask a candidate what their death row meal would be. And it's just a way to, infuse some fun into the process and learn a little bit more about them. Videos are another great way to infuse culture into your recruiting and hiring process. So highlighting some employee interviews or, a day in the life are a great way to share a little bit more about your company. Having really good branded material. We're not doing the paper job or the in-person job fairs where you have a booth set up and you have a big stack of business cards and, this beautiful, what looks like a step and repeat behind you. It's all virtual. So you want to make sure that your branded material that you're sending out to candidates before any type of interview or during the application process is brand aligned. So it matches the rest of your marketing material, but it's also really simple and really beautiful and really visually appealing. So the candidates aren't spending, an hour and a half reading this 12-page summary of what it's like to be an employee with your company. I also like the idea of preparing some type of either video or documentation that shares what the application process entails. Google does a really good job with this. They have a fantastic video that films two of their recruiters, and I like who they chose to be in that film because it's a female recruiter and then a minority recruiter. So it's showing a little bit of that like me connection for candidates, but it's about 5 minutes and they share who does the recruiting, how quickly candidates can hear back from someone, what their process looks like. They also share tips and tools of what to do when you're filling out the application or what to do when you're filling out the resume. And so it helps shed some light into the process and what candidates can expect while showing a little bit of their culture and their diversity. So it serves two purposes. You can also do an office tour, a virtual office tour. So this could be something that you could put on your website. and just have as like a freestanding video that anyone can view whenever they're applying. Or it can be something that you can send to candidates directly. Yes, I will put the video link in the, I'll probably send it out if that's okay. If we can send that Google video out with the slides maybe. Because I just think it's an interesting way to do it. Okay, I think someone has a question. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't find the little hand raising thing.
That's okay.
So. Okay, so when you were talking about doing like videos and stuff of how like the job looks and like an everyday thing. So I've been using Indeed for like positions at my agency, and I don't know where I would post that on Indeed. Like,
are you using paid Indeed or
no,
free?
Yeah, the free one.
Yeah, so for, and I don't even think paid Indeed is that has that feature, but maybe it's something that you put on your website, or I don't know who hosts your website, but I use Wix, and I know that I can do like hidden pages where it's not something that's searchable, but I can send the link out to a candidate, Boss Consulting HR, hiring, and here's the specific things that I want them to see. So I don't think that you can do it through Indeed, but maybe you could do it on the back end of your website, or we'll talk about automation in a second, but maybe there's a way for you to just have a standard email template that when you have a candidate that you really like, that you see being a good fit for your positions, you can send them this template that has, a video of their recruiting process, or, the office tour, or here's a little bit of our culture, or a video from our president CEO. The functionality of Indeed is not robust, especially on the free version.
Yeah.
So, plus they mask everybody's email when they apply. So, it's not the best platform, but you do get a lot of candidates. So that's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So an office tour is a fun way to show a little bit about your company. If your business is open and the position is just a remote position, you can highlight what a day in the life of an employee would look like. Or if it's closed, you can share something that might showcase what everyday work is like. You can share a little bit you can interview employees, you can show the break room, you can include, again, like a message from your CEO. You can show the fun and unique aspects that make being an employee of that company exciting and rewarding. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Barnberry Productions, he's fantastic. And if you have the budget to outsource, creating a video, do it. But it also doesn't have to be, crazy produced and expensive. You can do it on an iPhone. You can make it very simple, and then you own that content. So with virtual recruiting, if you don't have an online application, now is the time to do it. I hope you all do, but if you don't, now is the time to look at it and really make it accessible for those that you want to attract to your company. So you want to look at a couple different things that are going to help you with this process. So is it something that you can integrate into either your HRIS system or an applicant tracking system? So I'll use Indeed, for example. Indeed is a great platform to post jobs. You can post for free generally, and you get some pretty good visibility and some pretty good candidates. But if you wanted to integrate with any type of applicant tracking system, you have to pay for it. So, which is, if that's within your budget, by all means do it. But when you integrate with your applicant tracking system, your job gets posted on Indeed, and when somebody applies, it flows into your applicant tracking system. So that's going to save you time. It's going to keep all your applicants in one place. So see if there's something that you can do where you can integrate an online application with your HRIS system or your applicant tracking system. When you're developing your online application, you also want to consider a couple different things. So I have found with most of my clients that they just download an application off the internet. And that's totally fine. If that works, that's totally fine. But if you're going to be digitizing your application, now is the time to look at what questions are you asking of your candidates? What information are you collecting? I'm from Rhode Island originally, and there's this really fantastic restaurant down by the beach called Crazy Burger. And it's quirky and it's delicious food, but it's the environment and the atmosphere is really quirky. And the employees that work there are really quirky. And their application is actually a Mad Lib. And so that's just a great example of, you know, how they take their internal culture and they put it out to their applicants. It doesn't have to be, you know, a stuffy form. It can be fun. It can be interactive. It can be playful. And it's a great way to show a bit about your company culture. You obviously want to make sure you're being compliant with the questions that you do ask. So that is something that you want to consider. You want to make sure that you're not asking for salary history in Connecticut or anything about criminal information or criminal background. So make sure that you're following compliance and best practice in terms of the interview questions. And then you also want to consider the length. I find employers just want to they want to get all the information they possibly can about a candidate, and that's going to turn people off sometimes to your application process. So really consider the length and the purpose of the questions that you're asking and whether it's relevant for that stage of the process. And when you're doing online job postings, be clear. Be as clear as possible about the position. Is this position something that is going to be remote long-term? Is it temporarily remote? Does it require the employee to be online, let's say, for specific hours between 9 and 5, or does it not require that? Put the salary range. Please put the salary range to your positions. You know, Indeed's great. You can put starting at or range. You don't have to, you know, disclose your entire compensation structure, but it's going to help weed out candidates that aren't good fit for the position and the rate of pay that you're able to budget for. So let's talk a little bit about automation. And this is the way that you can save time with your recruiting process. I'm not sure what, you know, everyone's recruiting process looks like, but doing it virtually and really having a good workflow can save you a lot of time and headache. So obviously an online application is going to help with this process. Using some type of applicant tracking system that will allow you to search very quickly for a candidate or search really quickly for some type of skill set and track people throughout the process. There's also reporting and analytics a lot of times with these applicant tracking systems. So you can see, okay, if we're posting on Indeed, here's the visibility that we're getting versus posting on LinkedIn versus posting with a newspaper. You can track where you're getting the best candidates and the most candidates from. What's also nice about having an applicant tracking system is you can have multiple users and hiring managers. So again, this is going to be dependent on how you hire within your company, but I find managers are awfully hard to track down sometimes and have honest conversations about candidates. So when you have a system that allows for multi-users, it allows you to send an email to someone and just say, hey, check out this candidate. Oh, you read that email? Great, I'm going to follow up with you. I use a system called Bullhorn, and it tracks all my candidates. I can send emails directly to my clients through Bullhorn, and then it tells me when they read that email. So there's no saying that you didn't get a chance to look at that candidate. Online assessments can also be integrated into your recruiting process. And so there's in marketing, there's this thing called click funnels, which are basically like a way to move somebody down the process. And you can create essentially a recruiting funnel that is entirely automated. So depending on your system, you can set it up where if somebody applies, they get an automatic acknowledgement email. And then if they have a certain level of education or a certain skill set or certain keywords on their resume, you can set it up where it could automatically prompt them or send them an online assessment. You obviously want to be careful with the use of online assessments. You don't want them to be the only way to assess someone's skills or fit for a role. You want to look at the entire picture, but they can be a great way to narrow down your candidate pool. And then online pre-screening is another way that you can use technology to automate your system. I know that CVS uses a system where when you apply, they have a recruiter who screens your resume. And if you make it to the next stage, you do a virtual pre-screen. So it's this platform where they have a pre-recorded message from their, I think it's their VP of HR about the process. And then they prompt you with recorded questions from the VP again that are pre-screened questions. So a video will come up and say, how would you address a situation that caused an internal conflict within you? That's what the VP will ask. And then you'll have an opportunity to record your response. So there's no human interaction, it's all video recorded. So you as the employer, if you decide to use a tool like that, you can see someone's mannerisms, you can see someone's eye contact, you can see how well someone responds to the question. So that's just another way to build some automation and some virtual components into your recruiting process. Okay, so let's talk about having a virtual career event. Have any of you been successful in having one yet during this pandemic? No. I find that the universities are still offering them, but I'm not seeing much on the employer side. So we talk about branding a lot now when it comes to employment and having an employer brand that is easily recognized. So if you think about the Googles of the world or Zappos or those really well-known brands, they have an employer brand that comes along with their company brand. What is it like to work for that employer? I remember when I was in college and I was hearing about Google's nap pods. That's part of their brand strategy when it comes to recruiting. And so if you have an already well-established brand that is easily recognized, you've done probably half the work associated with setting up a virtual career fair. Because the major part of getting the visibility to that career fair is drawing attention and awareness to that event. So if you're regularly using social media and other aspects of your business or email lists to promote your business, then you can likely easily execute a career fair. But if you don't, you want to start getting comfortable understanding, MailChimp or MailerLite or any of the other platforms that you can use to share information about your career event. So some things to consider. It's not advisable to decide to do a career fair, the same week that you decide. It takes a little bit longer to drum up interest, especially in social platforms. So you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to do some advertising, to build some awareness, to do some posts on social media, to share with your internal team. And if you work in a company that has that is regularly hiring, let's take Bacchus Hospital right now. They probably are always going to be recruiting for nurses. So maybe it would make sense for them to have some type of regular career fairs. Every other week on Friday at 12, there's a virtual career fair, and that will build some awareness and some recognition around when you have them. You also want to think about whether or not there's any additional resources that you might need. So maybe you need to tie in some type of scheduling software for applicants to or participants to schedule a one-on-one with one of the participants of the job fair. Do you build in your applicant tracking system? Do you invite candidates to submit a resume ahead of time? I also think when you're doing these events virtually, it requires a little bit more of kind of the all hands on deck mentality. So let's say you're just doing a virtual job fair for your company alone, okay? And normally, if you were to attend a job fair, it would just be your human resources representative or your HR director that would be attending. Depending on the volume of candidates that you're expecting, you might need to pull in your managers, your hiring managers, your VP, other HR team members, so that you can attend to the candidates that are showing interest. Facebook is a great way to get the word out about job and career fairs. I'm going to show you an example on the next slide of a company that offered a virtual career fair. But you can leverage Facebook events and the virtual component of Facebook to share information about a career fair. And that's also what's nice about doing it virtually is you have better access to data and analytics. You know, when we post about an event on social media, you can tell, I think this event had 27 people interested. So you can tell, you know, who's interested in attending. Are there certain times that people are more likely to attend, certain days that people are more likely to attend? So you have more access to some data and analytics that can really help steer your course in the future. So this is just an example of a company using Facebook to promote a career fair. So this is the Disciplines of Engineering Career Fair, and it's a multi-day career fair, and it's all online. So this actual event on Facebook had quite a following in terms of participants, and it directed them to sign up for the career fair in a specific time slot to interview with each of the employers. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a Google form. It can be, you know, maybe you have form ability on your website. Don't complicate it if it doesn't have to be complicated, and you don't have to go out and spend thousands of dollars on new software. You can try it once, try Google Forms, try Facebook, try, you know, a MailerLite form, try email advertising versus Facebook advertising. And if it doesn't work, then you try differently next time. But again, I mean, brand visibility is probably the biggest component and most important component to the success of a career fair. I'm a big firm believer in something called EVP, the employer value proposition. So it's essentially, what does someone get for spending 8 hours of the day with you? And how are you able to communicate that to your candidates and to your workforce? Are you a company culture that's built on fun? Are you a company culture that's built on innovation, on growth, on development, on learning, on anything? You know, what is your EVP that you put out to the world and to your candidates? You can also do these things called Ask Me Anythings, and it's kind of in line with those recruiting videos, but perhaps you do a Facebook Live that's an Ask Me Anything, and you have a hiring manager or recruiter as part of your team, and they're available to answer questions about the interview process, timelines, career growth, company culture, and maybe you time that with your online career fair. Your employees that you currently have are your best resource for building your brand and building awareness about a career fair. The worst case scenario, and I've seen it time and time again, is where the what is put on the outside is not what it is like on the inside. And I think those two examples of the Glassdoor effects, the Glassdoor reviews are a prime example. That employer puts very shiny things out into the universe in terms of their recruiting. But once you get on the inside, it's not like that at all. So make sure that you're treating your employees how you tell the rest of the world that you're treating your employees. That's really important. All right, let's talk about heuristics and a little bit about bias. So in a virtual world, we are subject to some different biases that we maybe not were faced with before. So there's this concept and there's this bias called affect heuristics. So when our brain is overwhelmed, it can take shortcuts. And so these shortcuts are called heuristics. So we tend to use heuristics when it's necessary to make kind of quick decisions or quick judgments. But those judgments and those decisions are based off of incomplete data. So when we're talking about this in a recruiting standpoint, it would mean that you would be judging someone's suitability for a position based on a superficial factor that in no way shows how they would carry out the task or the job. So some of the most common ones I see are like tattoos, judging someone and their fit for the job entirely on the reason that they have tattoos, not on their skill set, not on their education, not on their service mindset. Or maybe, someone who's overweight, or someone who's named Pete because you have an ex-boyfriend who's named Pete and you can't trust a Pete to do a good job, So these are all called heuristics. And so when we're recruiting virtually, it's really important that you have a good handle on your own biases, because you might experience or you might find yourself exhibiting some new biases. Like, for example, if you're doing some type of virtual interview, if that candidate is having any IT challenges or internet challenges, you immediately decide that they're not a fit for the job when there could be other reasons that are impacting that. So just being mindful, I guess, is the best way to put it, about what biases you might be bringing to the table and to the interviewing process. You really want to make sure when you're recruiting virtually that you have a good handle about your remote work policy. So is it going to be something that's long-term? Is it going to be something that's short-term? Is it temporary? When the pandemic's over, is everyone going to be expected to come back on site? Or is there an expectation that this position is responsible for being on site once a month? Will there be any other reasons that the employee has to come on site? And if so, how would they get there? What are the logistics around that? If you're, as an employer, looking for a candidate to have longevity with your company, you want to make sure that you're giving them the information and the tools to help them stay with you for a long time. If you don't communicate clearly that the position is only temporarily remote, that employee is only going to work for you for that period of time because they really need a long-term remote position. So have a good handle on that before you start speaking to your candidates, so that way you can communicate it clearly. So once you find a good candidate, the next part is to onboard them. And so when we talk about onboarding, some employers, it's just simply, a new hire orientation, and then they jump into the job. But with the virtual workforce, you have a really great opportunity to get intentional about your onboarding process. So onboarding is really essential for positive employee relations because you're building a foundation for that new employee to have relationships in the workplace and helping them to have a voice in their employee experience. It's really essential that you have and incorporate video component into your onboarding process, that people can see the people that they're going to be working with, that they can know if they're going to email John Smith. This is John Smith, and he has, a Patriots banner behind his desk, and he's really into the Patriots, and that's how they connect. I saw another TikTok video. I think the algorithm is telling me like, HR videos, but it was this poor girl, and she's videoing herself, and she's crying, and she's saying, this is the third day of my new job, and I'm entirely remote, and I have no idea what's going on, and I don't know who to ask. I don't know who to go to if I have questions. So again, it's really important that it's not everybody is willing and able to just blindly reach out to someone that they don't know, at the risk of seeming like they don't know what's going on, to try to get the help that they need. So be really intentional about it. Create a structured calendar or a schedule with separate links for each session. If you're inviting or having other people within your workforce participate, whether it's your CFO or your VP or your, that person's manager, making sure that you're stressing punctuality to internal colleagues that are doing presentations or that are participating is really important, because if they're not on time, that sends the message to your new employee that timeliness is not important to your workforce. You can add some social components and some networking components. I think it's really important to be mindful of the fact that we are all in Zoom burnout right now. And everybody's a bit sick and tired of looking at, everybody on the internet, so maybe having an onboarding schedule that entails 6-hour days of virtual stuff is not the best way to integrate someone into your business. Maybe you can do it in little snippets and 2-hour blocks, and they can fill the rest of their day with some other components. I also think another nice thing to do is to send them some type of pre-hire gift or welcome packet. Amy Porterfield is a digital marketer, and she, prior to anyone starting with her company, once they've been hired and given an official job offer, she sends them a box of books. And these books have all been instrumental in how she has grown her business and made her business so successful. And some of them are like life skill books, some of them are business books, some of them are process improvement books, but she sends them to her new candidates with a nice little handwritten note that, these books are really important to us in business. And I think that's a great way to do it, because not only are you sending a message to the candidate that we're ready for you, we're excited to have you on our team, but we also value professional development and education. And we want you to eventually get through all of these books because they're really important to our business process. So it's dual purpose there. And it doesn't have to be complicated. If you don't want to send a box of books, maybe you send a edible arrangement with a nice little note that says, we're excited to have you on Monday, or, a company sweatshirt or something like that. Or maybe it'd be even fun to do like a work from home care package where you give them a nice pair of slippers that are branded and a, branded coffee mug, and, just some fun ways to really integrate them into your little business community when they are working remotely. Any questions? So I just wanted to share a couple of platforms that I am familiar with in the virtual recruiting realm. So if you're looking to do more online and virtual recruiting events, Brazen is a great platform. Career Echo is also another great platform. And then Handshake. Do any of you use Handshake? You do? Okay.
Well, I've used it for other things, not for work stuff.
Yeah, Handshake, it's like, it took, I graduated college in 2011. It took 10 years for all the universities to get their act together in terms of college recruiting, but Handshake is a great resource for attracting college talent. and alumni talent. And they do a number of virtual career fairs, career expos, and that might be a good way for you to get your feet wet in the virtual recruiting. And then for the automation component, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Check and see with your payroll provider if they have any integration components within their platform. If you're already paying for it, maybe it's just a matter of turning it on and setting it up. So, check with ADP or Paychex or whoever you might use. And then I'm a big fan of Bullhorn as an applicant tracking system. There's ways to integrate that platform into job postings and to integrate a really robust application process and a click funnel, essentially, so you don't have to do much work to move people through the process. And then Jazz HR is another great resource. And that finishes it. Are there any kind of questions or scenarios or something that I didn't touch on that you want to know?
No, Dana, I have a couple takeaways though. I think
Yeah.
everything that you were saying is we're not hiring at this time. I mean, we have a small office of 3. However, you made many points on this, creating that clear message on when you're working in a virtual world. I hear the same thing that you have heard, I'm sure, that who do you go to and how. It's not like you can just pop over to somebody's cubby or jump into somebody's office and saying, hey, listen, I have something I want to throw by you. People don't know how to reach out to people. So I think you made a great point. I'm thinking another class, maybe how to continue your culture in a virtual world, based on a lot of the points you had here. How do you continue to keep that, it's very easy to keep the energy up at an event, or in the office or even in the coffee room. It's very easy to go in there and try to just, give somebody, you can see them kind of going, struggling something or going through something that maybe they just needed somebody to talk to just for a second to say, you know what, you're right. Suck it up, buttercup. We were talking about that earlier. And so I think you made a lot of key takeaways from this, creating, I think, a gift, upon a hire or somebody coming back that maybe have taken off for a good amount of time that were furloughed, letting them or reminding them that they're still there.
It's the hospitality of it. And I think, I made a joke the other day, like I could have saved probably $50,000 on a master's degree if I just listened to the idea that food makes employees happy. But when you do have an employee working remotely, how do you integrate them into, we ordered lunch on Fridays, or, we have a happy hour on Friday afternoons, or, so, and I think we also it's very easy to forget the simple things that make someone feel comfortable in their new space. So back when, we were doing more work on site, it's, it's the simple things of like, where's the bathroom? Where do I park? Where do I, when do I take a lunch? So we just have to change that thinking to being virtual. So, how do I log on? How do I use Slack? I've never used Slack before. Is there a great, education that I can do ahead of time so that I know what to expect when I start? When I take a lunch, am I expected to like sign off? All these kind of hospitality components can get lost sometimes. But when we do a really good job and we are intentional about what we share and who shares them and who's responsible for sharing them, the onboarding is tenfold better for employees.
Yeah, it's a great point.